from a place of being a really anxious, fearful person to a place of peace. And it's definitely still a journey. And some days there's that battle, isn't there, to kind of step backwards. But God has really transformed me. And probably most of you don't know this, but one of my earliest memories, I was probably 5, because it was not long after I started school. Every morning I'd be filled with so much anxiety, but more, the way I remember it feeling was like this feeling of dread, literally dread about leaving the house and going to school. The only thing that would calm me down, I remember sitting next to my parents' old school hi-fi system with the big like squidgy headphones, reading this audio book about this like family of patchwork animals. And it was the only thing, I had to listen to it every single morning to calm myself down enough to get out the door, because I was so nervous about school, people, I don't know really. And then that kind of, fast forward to secondary school, same sort of thing. Every night as I was trying to get to sleep, I'd have these 2 tapes, sort of calming, like, I don't know, whale noises or whatever, but I had to listen to one of those, otherwise I couldn't get to sleep, because I'd just be lying there so anxious about the next day and about school and friendships and just anything I could think of. And I'm not that person anymore. And it hasn't been, like, for some people there's just this moment, isn't there? In fact, I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago. She's really involved with the healing rooms in Yate, and she said they had a guy in who had suffered from really bad PSTD for years and years, and they had him in 45 minutes of prayer and he was completely set free, like completely different. So for him it was just years and years, 45 minutes, encountering God, completely different. And for some people it happens like that. For me it's been a journey, and that's probably a lot of our experience as well. There's been this steady transformation, but I was thinking this morning, it's definitely not me just learning to live with it or controlling it or finding ways to cope with it. It's not that, because I know what it's like. I lived for a while trying to deal with it in my own way. And actually there was a lyric that Josh quoted a few weeks ago from a song by Callie that says, "Control is not peace." And I remember when I first heard that, I was like, whoa, like, that was spot on how I used to try and live. If I can think about it, I used to drive myself crazy. Like, if I can think about every single thing that could possibly go wrong today and make a plan for how to deal with it, then I'll be all right. And that kind of imitates peace, but it's not peace, because you can never actually completely control circumstances. Something unexpected is always going to happen and throw you again. So I've done that. What I experience now, day to day, is not that. It is definitely just Jesus. It is just Jesus. And he talks to me so much, I guess because it's what I need to hear, but so much about I am your peace. It's well with my soul, Laura, so it can be well with yours. Nothing will ever separate you. And when I'm walking in that, when I believe that, I can, and the exciting thing is for me, is I can not only, and I can't tell you what it's like, and you'll know it, and it'll be something different for you, or maybe the same thing, but to know what it's like to live that way, and then to not live that way anymore, it's just the best thing ever. You can just walk around and you actually can notice other people, because you're not in just your own headspace consumed with trying to manage this thing. You've actually got capacity to be like, how are you? And I can love you and I can serve you because I'm not all in here. So to live like that in and of itself is just joy. But then also what I'm excited about is being able to become a place of peace for other people as well. That's something God's talked about a lot. Not only do you get to experience peace, but you can be a sanctuary and a place of peace, that when people interact with me, they can encounter something of that peace of Jesus. So that for me is the biggest thing in my life. Oh,
So it makes a difference. Okay, it's made a difference in Laura's life. So I'll just tell you a little story. I've been meeting up with this lady. She's given me full permission to share her story today. Meeting up with this lady called Roz for a year, and she became a Christian a year ago, and she had come from, I might have told a little bit of her story in the past here, but she just came from a terrible, terrible life, and she had had some really awful things happen to her, and her testimony is on the Whole Minds website, which I've talked about a few times, so you can read it if you like. It was absolutely awful, and she was a person who'd never known peace, never, ever been happy, ever. And when she became a Christian and started to know God, she just kept on saying, I'm just such a different person. You didn't know me before, but this is different. I'm so different. She said, I know peace now. And she talked a little bit like Laura did. And so we've been meeting up most of the year, and we've been sort of unpacking what it is to be a Christian. It's been really interesting to do that with somebody who's not had any concept, did not know anything, probably just hadn't heard of the resurrection. I mean, it's totally, no contact with Christianity in the whole of her 58 years. And anyway, she's been doing this little Bible study with two friends coming up to Easter. And about 2 weeks ago, she emailed me and she said, I have just realised you all think Jesus rose from the dead physically. And she said, it has really messed me up. And I don't know if I can handle it. She was saying it's so illogical, and for me logic in my life has been the only thing that's really got me through. And she just said I just don't think it's true. And she was just really upset, and she actually wrote to me, and a couple of days later she just said, I can't accept this, it is too mad. She said, I think it's the end of the road for me. I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. And she said, I thought you thought he was a spirit, like a spiritual presence, but you all think that he actually rose from the dead physically. And she'd done a whole year of being a Christian, and she hadn't realised that. And it really made me think about what I thought, and like what we think about whether we really believe that Jesus rose from the dead physically. And I think, the obvious answer for a lot of people sitting in a room they're here on Easter Sunday morning is, yeah, of course we do. But one of the things I know when I went to Israel a few years ago and was walking around the sort of streets in Israel is this weird, uncomfortable feeling of just thinking Jesus walked up this road, he's kind of known to have walked here or there, and going to the places where Jesus walked, and thinking, okay, a human being walked up this road, he looked like every other human being, would I have believed it? And I really realising I think it might have been really hard to actually just look at a human being and think, you are the Son of God. Now we know that they didn't fully understand it more until after the resurrection, and then even then the church took a little while to get going on understanding what it meant to be God and man. But to actually believe you're more than just a human is not that easy. So whatever you think you believe about the resurrection, yes, Jesus rose from the dead, of course he did, I challenge you to think about whether you really believe it. And the thing that was really interesting to me is that this lady, Roz, she decided it's the end of the road if she couldn't believe it. And I think that that was really insightful of her to know it. That you could, she had been thinking she could be a Christian, and she'd been experiencing peace and all that sort of thing, and she'd been thinking, well, I can, previously, when she didn't think Jesus rose from the dead physically, I can do this and everything, but realising that you have to actually believe he rose from the dead physically, and the resurrection literally made her think it's the end of the road for me. And then I sort of said, we've met up, and I sort of said, just don't try and solve it, don't, just wait. That's really what I felt to say to her, just wait and see what God will do. I'll tell you the next bit of the story in a little bit, but I just want you to think about that. Jesus was this person who, he lived a very obscure life. He didn't travel any more than 30 miles from his home at any point. He had no education, he didn't have any rich friends, he was from a poor family, and his death, he was just one of many people who were executed in that way. And the place where he was executed was actually just a rubbish dump outside the city. It wasn't like a glorious green hill far away and all that sort of thing. And the old rugged cross was just a bit of old wood that they used. All his friends abandoned him at the main moment, and there were just a few women hanging around the cross, because women. And totally obscure, nothing in his death. And so the disciples, after his death, that's the thing they're dealing with. They're gathered in this upper room, and they're terrified, just like you would be, because they think the next people in the wave of, next people, it's going to be us, the Romans are going to come for us, and they're trying to eradicate this sort of little sect and everything. It was just a very human, small, squalid little story, and all the kind of stuff that they'd seen Jesus have done would have been totally eclipsed by what they'd just seen. That is the reality. And I just want to make sure you kind of really get hold of that. And then suddenly they're in this upper room, and Jesus appears to them while they're talking about these things, it says in Luke 24, and he said to them, "Peace to you." What a complete shock. I mean, you've got to try and get your head round it. They thought it was all over, and then there's this shocking sort of, he's there. I mean, how did he get in there? He must have walked through a wall, or, he can walk through walls, he does it later. And he just says to them, be at peace, what Laura's been saying. And then Paul goes on to say that he appeared to about 500 people in this next little bit. So he keeps on popping up in all sorts of different places. And Christians believe that Jesus was raised from the dead, and it's different to resuscitation, just to get that out of the way before we move on. Resuscitation is when you come back from the dead. Okay, so Lazarus came back from the dead, but he died again eventually. And other people have come back from the dead. There's only one person who came back from the dead and he's never going to die again. And that's Jesus. That is the difference between the resurrection and resuscitation. Just to get that out of the way. I just want to read a few quotes about Jesus, if you just whiz down the thingy. That's what Paul said. Hang on. Paul said this: if Jesus hasn't been raised from the dead, our preaching is, that's not very good, is it? Is pointless. So is your faith. More than that. There we go. If we're found to be false witnesses about God because we've testified about God that he raised Christ from the dead, and if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, you are still asleep in your sins, and those who have fallen asleep, died in Christ, are lost. If only for this life we have hope in Christ, where all people most to be pitied. That's kind of what my friend Roz was sort of realising, I think. We're just to be pitied. We're gullible people, and it's all a bit futile. Keep going. Right, here's H.G. Wells, not a Christian at all. Quite an atheist. I'm a historian, not a believer, but I must confess as a historian that this penniless preacher from Nazareth is irrevocably the very centre of history. Jesus Christ is easily the most dominant figure in all of history. Yes, he is. Keep going. I love these quotes. This is Napoleon, not a very Christian man. I know men, and I tell you that Jesus Christ is no mere man. Between him and every other person in the world, there is no possible term of comparison. Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and I have founded empires. But on what did we rest the creation of our genius? Putin ought to take a leaf out of this book. Upon force. Jesus Christ founded his empire upon love, and at this hour millions of men and women who die for him. Keep going, last one. John Knox, he was executed for his faith in the 16th century. No one else holds or has held the place in the heart of the world which Jesus holds. No other gods have been as devoutly worshipped. No other man has been so devoutly loved. Because he's actually made a massive difference in human history, and there's got to be some explanation, and the resurrection is the explanation. Now, I was going to read Luke 24, but Greg read it in the worship. So if you remember that little bit, if you go to the last slide, I think, it's talking about the women coming upon Jesus, coming upon the empty tomb, and they see the angels, and the angels say, he's not here, he's risen. Remember how he told you, while he was still with you in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. He told them. And they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and all the others. Peter got up and ran to the tomb, bending over, he saw the strips of linen, and he went away wondering to himself what had happened. While they were still talking about that, Jesus himself stood among them and said, peace be with you. And they were startled and frightened, thinking they'd seen a ghost. That's what my friend Ross thought Jesus was, a ghost. She said it. She said, I thought it was kind of like a ghosty thing. He said to them, why are you troubled and why do doubts rise in your mind? Of course they do. Look at my hands and my feet. It's I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see I have. Interesting. So Jesus kind of knows, doesn't he, that you're going to, hang on, stop there. There. Jesus knows that you're going to struggle with this. And if you haven't struggled with it, honestly, you haven't thought about it. Jesus rose from the dead physically. It's not that easy to believe. I tell you what makes it easier. It was 2,000 years ago. That's all it is. And if I said to, if people started saying now it happened, you would have struggled with it. And I think it's really important that we just have a little bit of time around Easter just to think, what does it mean that he physically rose from the dead? So what happens is the first day these women come and they want to anoint they want to kind of put these spices and rewrap his body. It's a normal thing that happens on the day after somebody's died. They come and they rewrap the body, ready to embalm Jesus, to try and preserve, it's probably Ukraine or Poland, try and preserve the dead body of Jesus. That's what the spices are about. So they rewrap it and they put all these spices in, trying to keep it as long as possible in the physical realm, a dead body. And so they go in and they want to wash and prepare and wrap his body because of the Sabbath day. Jesus is already in the tomb, and basically the expected trajectory of pain is downwards. That's really what they're thinking. We're going there and we're going to go and embalm this dead body, and it's going to be utterly painful because we loved him so much and he's gone and it's over. And so they bring these spices for the dead, and I just think actually that is often, I wonder if a lot of us have this thing generally in the back of our minds until it's really dealt with and confronted, that nothing ever changes. Life often goes a bit downhill. We peaked a little while ago. We didn't realise when we were peaking, and unfortunately we didn't celebrate it. And actually it's worse now than it used to be. Or we live in a kind of future thing where we think one day that's coming, but we're not in it now. And so these women are in that place of like, oh my goodness, the best is not yet to come. It happened, and we didn't maybe even know it. And so we're just going to go and try and embalm it, this experience we've had, cover it with things and try and preserve it as long as possible. There's a real challenge, I think, for us. I don't want to labour the point too much, but I think it's really possible to live trying to dress up and embalm a dead experience and forget that we're supposed to have a living experience, a resurrection experience that stays with us, and it's in the future, it's in the now and in the future, not just in the past. So if you're someone who feels like, oh, I had a really amazing God time a few years ago, and that was really good, and I loved it and everything, and when I was at Bethel for Louisa or wherever it is, that was the great time. Don't be like the women embalming that time, thinking that was the time that was the best time, because the resurrection says that the best is yet to come. Secondly, you've got the little clip. I'm just going to show you a little clip from Risen. Who's seen the film Risen? It's a really cool film, you need to see it. Okay, so this is a little clip from it, and hang on a second. This guy, it's the centurion, it's supposed to be the centurion that oversaw Jesus' crucifixion. The one who kind of is questioning, is this the Son of God? And, it follows his story. So Jesus has already been crucified, and this guy called Clavius is the centurion, and he's basically wants to eradicate Christianity, and he's been given the job by the Roman rulers, get rid of this annoying sect who have started to say that Jesus is risen from the dead. Stupid idea, of course, because it is a stupid idea, and they're trying to spread this idea. And then this is his moment where he just he actually starts, you watch it, and then you should go and watch the whole film. That's Clavius.
Bring the armies in. You, get the army in.
That's him looking in the tomb.
as if they burst.
Tribune, see this?